All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a dense, incredibly revealing intelligence report from Freedom House to uncover exactly how the Chinese Communist Party tries to shape what Americans see, hear, and read. We're essentially unpacking a hidden, invisible battleground of media influence that's happening right under our noses, and we are going to break down exactly how it works.
To set the stage here, we're drawing directly from expert testimony given to the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. This isn't just guesswork. It's built on a massive, global index that assessed both influence tactics and democratic resilience between 2019 and 2021. So we're getting a heavily data-backed look at what is, for all intents and purposes, a covert information war.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the information battleground, Beijing's media toolbox, targeting the Chinese diaspora, resilience versus vulnerability, measuring the impact, and finally, safeguarding the future. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Information Battleground. What exactly does Beijing want?
According to the testimony, the foundational goals are actually pretty straightforward. First off, they want to promote a positive, or at the very least, a benign view of their authoritarian regime. Second, they're looking to encourage foreign investment and strategic engagement. And third, they want to marginalize, demonize, and just entirely suppress critical voices, especially when it comes to sensitive topics like human rights in Xinjiang or democratic rollbacks in Hong Kong.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Since 2019, those goals have evolved. It's no longer just about making China look good. The strategy has expanded to actively amplify existing partisan divisions right here in the U.S. They're also pushing hard to deflect blame for global crises, like the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, and trying to pin the blame for poor U.S.-China relations entirely on the American government.
Moving to Section 2. Beijing's Media Toolbox. Overt and Covert Tactics.
So how do they actually execute these goals? Well, it's a completely multifaceted approach. We're talking way beyond simple old-school propaganda here. Their toolbox includes highly targeted censorship, massive disinformation campaigns, and even aggressive attempts to control the literal infrastructure of how content gets distributed. There's this fascinating metaphorical phrase Chinese officials actually use, borrowing the boat to reach the sea. It perfectly nails their overt strategy. They essentially use trusted American platforms to reach American audiences. For instance, Department of Justice filings show state media outlets like China Daily paid at least $7 million for newspaper inserts in major trusted U.S. publications. They are literally buying credibility.
You really have to note the stark contrast between their overt and covert tactics. On the overt side, you've got their diplomats securing interviews on mainstream Sunday morning TV shows. But the covert side, that is much more insidious. We're talking about paying local YouTube vloggers to make pro-Beijing travel videos without disclosing the sponsorship, running vast networks of fake social media accounts, and even using PR firms to hire unwitting Americans to stage protests.
And just to be completely impartial here, the intelligence makes it crystal clear that this influence is strictly nonpartisan. They are co-opting elites across the entire political spectrum. They've sponsored trips for U.S. journalists and mayors through state-backed groups like QICEF. There was a $5 million grant to the George H.W. Bush Foundation. The report even traces financial ties to far-left networks that downplay human rights abuses, while also noting that far-right commentators have approvingly cited CCP authoritarian policies for their own domestic arguments. They really don't care about your politics. They just care about echoing the narrative.
Section 3. Targeting the Chinese diaspora through control and censorship. If you look at the Chinese diaspora living in the U.S., their media options are heavily skewed. Major U.S. cable packages for Mandarin and Cantonese speakers are virtually monopolized by stations directly owned or heavily influenced by the Chinese government. Independent, critical voices are almost entirely boxed out of those default packages. And then, of course, there's WeChat. This tremendously popular app is a massive vulnerability. U.S. residents using WeChat are subjected to intense, politicized censorship. If you criticize the party, you're looking at shadow bans, account deletions, and deeply concerning surveillance that can actually result in your family back in China being threatened. It essentially forces a massive wave of self-censorship right here in America.
Which brings us to Section 4, Resilience versus Vulnerability, the U.S. Scorecard.
Let's actually check the scorecard from the Freedom House Index. You'll see Beijing's influence effort scores a very high 53 out of 85. But thankfully, the U.S. local resilience registers at a robust 72. That means, broadly speaking, the nation is resilient, actually placing it second only to Taiwan among the countries they studied.
So where does that resilience come from? It stems heavily from First Amendment protections, freedom of information laws, and transparency tools like FARA. But we still have critical vulnerabilities. Our intense political polarization makes us incredibly ripe for manipulation, and the glaring lack of comprehensive federal data privacy laws leaves Americans wide open to surveillance through foreign-owned apps like WeChat and TikTok.
All right, Section 5. Measuring the impact. Real-world consequences. The tangible impacts documented in this report are absolutely concerning. We're seeing periodic success in quashing critical corporate news stories, usually to protect business interests in China. Furthermore, Americans of Chinese descent are literally reducing their participation in critical journalism because they fear transnational repression. Plus, by gaining footholds in our tech platforms, Beijing is laying the exact foundation they need for future manipulation.
To put this into perspective, just consider this deeply alarming anecdote from the text. A targeted disinformation campaign pushed by Beijing falsely claimed the U.S. military brought COVID-19 to Wuhan. That lie spread so aggressively that an ordinary American soldier living in Maryland, along with her family, received death threats and actually required a personal security detail. This isn't just online chatter. It creates dangerous security threats for everyday citizens.
Finally, Section 6. Safeguarding the future. Actionable solutions.
So what do we do about all this? The report lays out some highly specific, actionable solutions. Legally, we need much stricter enforcement of transparency laws like FARA, so we actually know who is funding the state media we consume. When it comes to tech, the report actively warns against blanket app bans, which can damage free expression, and instead recommends comprehensive algorithmic audits. And crucially, we absolutely must fund independent Chinese-language journalism to ensure the diaspora has reliable, uncensored news options.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on based on everything we've just uncovered. In an increasingly complex, covert information war where influence is constantly bought, laundered, and disguised, how will you verify the hidden source of your news tomorrow? Stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep learning.